Am I the jerk for asking my parent what they're using my money for? I am 16 years old and living with my mother. My father is not in the picture anymore, so she is a single parent. Her job does pay her a good amount of money, although I do not really know her salary. I have a part-time job, and since it is the summer, I am working constantly, wanting to save my money so that I can buy myself some things that I have been needing. I have been needing some new clothes, shoes, and skincare items. I know how hard my mom works and understand how stressful it can be to be the sole provider in the household. I always try to help out whenever I can. Even though I only receive a student wage, I buy our cats food, which usually ranges from $80 to $120, to ease as much stress from her as possible. Recently, she has been using this to her advantage. I am a very giving person and always want to help people, which usually makes me vulnerable. Last week, she asked me to lend her $200 for a moving truck since we are moving, and her paycheck was not able to cover it. She gave me a breakdown of how the $200 was going to be used. Since it is the summer, my paycheck was around $500. I decided to put $200 into my savings and give her the $200 that she needed. The next day, when I asked her about it, she told me, I have to do it tomorrow, and apparently, since the truck increases in price, she asked me for more money. I was getting frustrated because this is not the first time she has asked for a large amount of money from me. At the start of January, she asked me for $300 for something that I cannot remember, and she paid me back only for me to give it back again. More recently, this amount has been increasing. She does not drive, and I worked late until 1 a.m. Since I did not have any money, the only money I had was in my savings and I really did not want to use it, I asked her 2 days in advance if she was able to send me $30 for an Uber so that I could get home. She told me that she would be able to do it with no problem. But when the day came around and I called her, she told me that she could not and that I should use the money from my savings. When I was visibly upset and annoyed when I got home, she told me that I was being selfish and ungrateful. The amount has now increased to about $290. I've been trying to ask her what she needs the money for, but she has not been telling me. When she gets her pay, she always buys stuff for herself, and for the important stuff, she uses the money that I work for. I know I should be helping since she is my mother, but I want to have the money that I work for to myself sometimes, and that never happens. When I told her this, she proceeded to yell at me and tell me that I do not see how hard she is trying, and that I am being a selfish and ungrateful daughter. I do not know if I am in the right or wrong. In my opinion, you have done nothing wrong here. Being a single mom is tough, but your mom also seems to have problems managing her money. It's not right for her to keep taking your money, and you're already helping enough. She needs to get better organized and take responsibility without relying on your student salary. Am I the jerk for not inviting my sibling's brother to Disneyland? I, a 28-year-old female, never had much growing up. We were super poor, and I never got to go on a holiday or anything. My sister is 10 years older than me, and I remember her promising that when she turned 18, she'd take me to Disneyland. Of course, this never happened. I decided when I was pregnant that I wanted to take my 7-year-old son, whom I will call F in this story, to Disneyland, as it's always been a dream of mine. We're not rich by any means. I am a single parent on minimum wage, but since I was pregnant, I've been saving a little each month. My son's father, who is 39 years old, and I broke up while I was still pregnant. We had only been together for 3 months when I got pregnant, so it didn't work out. Now his dad can be a bit unreliable. He doesn't see our son often. I have to call him to arrange visits, and he pays barely anything in child support. He has another son who is 13 years old, whom I will call L. When my son's father and I were living together, we got along fine. I was never able to parent L or anything, but we were buddies. When my son was born, my ex and L used to visit once a week. When they'd come over, I'd make L dinner and play games with him so his dad could spend time with F. Eventually, my ex wouldn't show up for weeks at a time, and L stopped coming around. Now, my ex is super into outdoorsy stuff, something I cannot do because I have a disability. He goes on these camping trips, mountain climbing, and other cool activities that appeal to little boys. He's been taking L on these trips since before F was born. Since F was born, they continued their trips but have only invited F once. F has never spent a night at his father's house. My ex simply refuses. L has his own bedroom at my ex's and stays 3 nights a week. So, I didn't think it'd be an issue that I didn't invite L to Disneyland with me and my son. I care for the kid, but I don't have any real bond with him. I finally saved up and we're going to Disneyland in October. My son told his brother, and I got a call from my ex calling me a heartless person because I didn't invite his son. I'm starting to feel kind of bad. So, am I the asshole? You did nothing improper. Even without considering how your ex treats F, L is not your son, and you want to take a trip with your own family. Your ex wants you to be a better parent to his son, a kid who is in no way related to you than he has been to his own son with you. Plus, L is 5 years older and would want to do very different things at Disneyland. Enjoy your trip. Am I the jerk for cursing out a lifeguard? I'm 17 years old and I babysat my little cousins, who are 11 years old and female, and 1 year old and male, all day Friday and Saturday, while their parents were at a child-free wedding in Seattle. Since it was extremely hot, we decided to go to the local community pool. We have been to this pool numerous times before, and I obviously checked in with the parents first. For context, my little cousins are black, and the lifeguard and I are white. The 11-year-old is on her school's swim team, and we are in the deep south. We went to the pool, and I was in the shallow end holding the baby boy and letting him splash his hands in the water. A lifeguard who looked around my age and whom I hadn't seen at the pool before came up to me and told me that I had to hold all small children or have them in a swim carrier. I was confused because I was already holding the baby, and then she pointed to the 11-year-old who was using a kickboard on the other side of the shallow end. I was even more confused because although the 11-year-old is a little short, she still looks older than a baby. I said, "She is 11 years old, and she is a strong swimmer." The lifeguard responded, "No, she cannot. It's the same rule for all small children." I repeated that she is 11 years old, not a small child, and pointed out that there were other children around her age or younger who were swimming normally. The lifeguard said, "This isn't about them." I called the 11-year-old to swim closer to us, and for the next 10 minutes, she played with her little brother in the shallow end. Then, the 11-year-old asked me to time her while she held her breath underwater. The moment her head went under the water, the lifeguard blew her whistle and dragged her out of the water while I was yelling at her to stop. The lifeguard yelled at me that she could not swim. While she was yelling, the 11-year-old started crying and showed me that she had a few scratches on her leg from where the edge of the pool had rubbed against her when the lifeguard pulled her out. I lost it. By now, everyone was already looking at us because the lifeguard was yelling. I yelled back at her saying, "She's on the swim team, you crazy racist. You made her bleed, you psycho." I then gathered everything and we left. I called my aunt and uncle on the way home and they came back Saturday afternoon. My aunt and uncle are on my side after hearing the recounting from the 11-year-old and me. However, my mother says that I embarrassed myself by yelling and overreacted. My priest also says that I was in the wrong for swearing. Am I the asshole? You are not the bad guy in this situation. That's not normal. During all the times in public pools, there are always younger kids swimming around with floaties, and lifeguards don't usually intervene like that. Some new and young lifeguards might get overly strict, but it's still important to address any unfair behavior. Consider getting involved and potentially reporting the issue if it doesn't get resolved. Am I the jerk for telling my uncle that the only reason we're speaking in his language is because he doesn't know mine? My parents immigrated to the United States before any of my siblings or I were born, but all of their family stayed behind in Vietnam. I grew up learning Vietnamese and speaking it at home, to the point that I've been told by people in Vietnam that my pronunciation is pretty much indistinguishable from a fully native speaker. Although my vocabulary is definitely not the best, since English is my main language in the vast majority of day-to-day situations. I recently went on a family trip back to Vietnam to visit extended family. I had graduated from college since the last time I visited, so my uncle asked me what I majored in. I majored in aerospace engineering. I don't know how to say that in Vietnamese, and he knows pretty much zero English, so I said that I didn't know what it was called and then described it. He made a guess based on what I described, and I don't really know what his guess meant. I just said I think so, and then he made a snarky comment about how anyone whose parents are both native Vietnamese speakers should also be fully fluent in it. Later, at some point, I had to go to the doctor for some medical issue and my uncle was there in addition to my parents. I was able to describe all my symptoms and the doctor prescribed me a couple of medications. Afterwards, I asked my parents to explain what each medication was for since I didn't fully understand. My uncle made another comment about how I clearly don't use Vietnamese enough at home and should use it more. I snapped and said that I was good enough at it for my own satisfaction. He smirked at that and said, "It's your native language, you should be better." I replied with something along the lines of, "No. My native language is English. The only reason we're conversing in Vietnamese right now is because that's the only language you know." After that, it was kind of weird. We usually don't interact all that much, but I've been steering clear of him because it still annoyed me. But I don't know if my response was too mean. You are not the problem. He was bullying you a bit because you are not fluent in Vietnamese, a language you picked up while living in the US. He should have encouraged and helped you become more proficient instead of making hurtful side remarks. It's annoying when relatives use language to criticize family members who moved away, especially when your command of your parents' native tongue is still impressive. Am I the jerk for not sharing my power bank? I recently traveled abroad with a group of 8 people. The trip took place in the context of a conference, and a few days were added on for sightseeing. I did not know anyone on this trip beforehand, just to understand what the relationship was like. At our destination, quite a lot is done via smartphone, including paying, checking in for flights, getting train tickets, and booking taxis. It was my first time there, and the idea of running out of battery and being stranded was quite unsettling for me. I did not want to be left without power. My phone is also a bit older, and the battery is no longer the best. So I brought a power bank and only used my phone for the essentials during the day's activities. I took photos, paid, and read a bit about the sites that were on the agenda. So I got through the trip quite well and only occasionally plugged my phone into the power bank on the way, which was still about 60% full in the evening. My fellow traveler, let's call her Jenny, was a bit more relaxed and used her phone to the full. She took photos and videos, shared them with colleagues, FaceTimed home from time to time, watched videos, listened to music, and surfed all kinds of social media channels. Her phone was empty by the early afternoon, and she was always allowed to use a fellow traveler's power bank as she did not bring one. We flew back to our country very late at night, and it was quite clear that it would be difficult to find a power outlet anywhere by then, as we were on the road all day. During boarding, Jenny asked me if she could have my power bank as her phone was almost empty. My power bank was still a little over half charged at this point, but I wanted to keep it as we had an 11-hour flight ahead of us, and I still had to book a train to my city after landing in our country, for which I needed a working phone. So I politely refused and told her that I unfortunately could not share. She accepted it without a comment, but I have now heard from a fellow traveler that she called me a stingy asshole. In hindsight, I probably could have spared a few percent of battery, but I think that other people's poor planning is not my responsibility. Am I the asshole? You are not in the wrong. Jenny should have brought her own power pack instead of relying on others. Her failure to prepare isn't your problem. Hopefully, this will teach her to plan ahead in the future. Emergencies on her part don't constitute problems for you. Am I the jerk for telling my extended family that I'm not dumb and know how things are with them and my dad? I, a 16-year-old female, always knew my father did not like his family. We saw them very little throughout my life. It is really rare that we are with his side, but they are not totally no contact either. It is always tense when we are around each other. 2 weeks ago, my father's cousin was in town, and there was a party for the extended family. I spent most of the time with my father's cousin's children, who I see more frequently. At some point, an argument started, and things escalated. Then I was approached by some extended family members, and it became a mess. The thing with my father and his family is that my father is half adopted. His father, my grandfather, died when he was 5 years old. His mother, my grandmother, remarried less than a year later, and my father was adopted by his stepfather by the time he was 7. My father was never okay with the adoption. He was angry, hurt, and grieved the fact that his father was replaced. He never forgave his mother. He never liked his stepfather for doing it and never called him dad or liked him because of it. His mother and stepfather tried to make him change his feelings. When his half-siblings were born, they were on their parents' side. My father saw it as unforgivable. When he went to college at the age of 17, he never went back home. He had very little contact with them. He did not invite either his mother or stepfather or his half-siblings to his wedding. I think it was after that they got really upset with him for still having an issue with being adopted. His name was changed too. When my parents got married, my father changed his last name to my mother's. They told me she would have taken his last name if his had not been changed when he was a child. To save money, they decided to have my father change his name instead of both of them changing it. When I was born, they named me Morgan, which was my father's original last name, and my grandfather's last name. He told me how much the name meant to him and to my mother too, because she said she loved how he lit up every time I was called Morgan. I know my father hates his family. He gets along well with his cousins though. During the argument at the extended family party, my father's mother, stepfather, and his half-siblings came over to me and tried to explain things to me. They acted like I had no idea what the fight was about, and they told me my father has some emotional issues. They said he was throwing another tantrum like he did when he named me, but that they all love each other really. I told them I am not dumb, and I know how things are with them. I told them I know my father hates them, and he never wanted to be adopted. Their anger came back and was directed at me. They told me I know nothing, and surely I can see how childish it is to hate being loved after more than 40 years. My parents stepped in and we left right after. But I got Facebook messages from some of them afterward, saying I should really think before I speak. Am I the asshole? Your actions were justified. You did nothing wrong and responded in a factual and honest way. They were trying to manipulate you, and your response clearly caught them off guard. Their delusions are tedious, and they should really think before they speak. This family they tried to force just isn't real, and it's their fault. Thanks for watching. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist in the description.